Well, hello everyone. Welcome to our next episode of From There to Here. And I have a very special guest, a guest that I have known, like some of my other guests, for a very long time. Like if we were talking the other day, if we were had ranked friends by seniority, she has pretty just about the most seniority on the list, going back to Peter Pan preschool once upon a time. This is psychologist Dr. Tracey Irvin Marks from Atlanta. Well, she's in the Atlanta area. She's from our hometown here, Daytona Beach, Ormond, but she's in Atlanta. She'll talk to you about that part. And she has a book coming out as well. And like a lot of the guests I've had before, she's had experiences and expertise in lots of different areas of life. She's one of those multi hyphenates. So we have a lot of different things we're going to get to talk about. But again, the show is from there to here, right? Because part of the ethos of the show is that people's stories will relate to other people. You'll see what I mean. Well, Dr. Marks, good morning.
Good morning to you, Larry.
Yeah.
I'm excited to be here with you. I don't rank as high as George. The interview you did with him, because you'd known him since you can remember even being alive. I came into the picture at year 4.
There you go.
So that's still pretty early.
That's pretty early. That puts you ahead of a whole bunch of people. So there you
Right.
go. I told you before that I was going to ask you what I asked all of our guests is to give their elevator speech, which is if you're in an elevator with someone and someone says, hey, who are you? What do you do? If you had to kind of boil your existence down in about 10 seconds, which is unfair, but if you did, what would you say?
Mine's easy. I'm a psychiatrist. I work in private practice and I provide mental health education content on the internet.
Okay. I'm sorry, I think I said psychologist before. So can you help for the layman? What's the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist? So I'm saying it right.
Thank you. Yeah. So there's a lot of overlap between psychologists and psychiatrists, but the key difference is in the educational training. So psychiatrists, like myself, are medical doctors. So we go to medical school, and psychologists get a doctorate level. Some get a master's level degree as well. You don't have to necessarily get a doctorate in psychology, but in order to be a licensed clinical psychologist, you'll hear that term on television and things, you have to have the doctorate level and so many hours of work in the field, et cetera. Okay. So, but in practice, aside from those educational differences, because as a physician, I go to medical school, the scope of what I do has a lot to do with identifying psychiatric manifestations of physical problems. So, for example, someone could have lupus and have lupus cerebritis, it's called, where there's inflammation of vessels in the brain and things, and that can cause people to have psychiatric symptoms all the way from depression to psychosis. Okay. Psychology, or a psychologist, where some of their training will deviate from what I do as a physician, is in the area of psychological testing and things. So if you had a child or you yourself needed to get testing because, let's say, you suspect you're dyslexic or have some kind of reading problems and things like that, psychologists are the ones who do that kind of testing because they're trained in that kind of work. It's what we both overlap with doing therapy. So psychiatrists also do therapy. I would say, though, that probably the psychologists have more forms of therapy that they're trained in probably than psychiatrists, but so we do overlap there. And also, as a physician, I prescribe medications, whereas psychologists generally don't, unless they're in a state where they have expanded to having prescribing privileges. And that's usually in states where there's not enough doctors around.
When you were a little girl and you're 3 years old, you say, you know what, when I grow up, I'm going to move to Georgia and I'm going to be a psychiatrist. Is that exactly how it happened?
Absolutely not. Because when I was growing up in the area that we were in, I didn't know anybody who'd ever been to see a psychiatrist
Right.
or a psychologist even. It's like, why would you go talk to somebody about your business who doesn't know you?
I knew on the Bob Newhart show when I was a kid, he was a psych, one of them. And that's about the only one, even on TV, that I knew, let alone in real life, Bob Newhart.
Right, exactly. So I knew about that show. I didn't watch it. So I really was not interested in psychiatry until medical school is really where I got the exposure to the specialty and saw what it really was. I was interested in internal medicine. So that was what I was going to do. I was going to be an internist and things. And it wasn't until I did the rotation and really liked how psychiatry addressed people's internal pain. And I've always been drawn to people who were hurting, or the
Mm.
broken, the bird with the broken wing, that kind of thing. And so it really ended up being a good fit for me. I just didn't appreciate it in those early years.
Did now, well, trying to think, I want to phrase this the right way. All right, there's a lot more acknowledgement, emphasis on just mental health in general, period, of course, than there was, 20 years ago, or when we were kids or whatever. What do you account for? Why is that? Why are we paying more attention to mental health things, psychiatry, psychology, and all that? Why more now than in the past? What do you think was the catalyst, or were the catalysts for that?
I think two things. One is the propagation of information on social media, whether the social media be like YouTube, like I'm doing with educational content, Instagram, TikTok, even. But even before that, I would say the second thing is celebrities and people who are well known in the media coming out and talking about their experience, like Mariah Carey and back in the day,
Early.
Carrie Fisher,
Yeah.
um, and scores of others. Now, it's a shame that that's what we need, celebrities to say, yeah, I have this problem, for it to be acceptable. But
Yeah.
if that works, it works. And it has worked for it to be talked about more openly and for people to feel more comfortable saying, oh, wow, this person I look up to has this and they're still doing well, they're still functioning. I can
Mhm.
too. And then maybe if I get help, then I can also do these things, et cetera. I mean, it's had kind of far reaching effects for
Okay.
people disclosing their struggles.
Because you know, I remember a time when not only did you not know anyone, getting any kind of mental health treatment or help, if it was even brought up, that person was just labeled as the most extreme, like, he's crazy or she's nuts, or stay away from her because I heard she went to talk to somebody. That it was pretty extreme for a long time.
Yeah, my mom is from Georgia, even though, we're from Florida. And she, so we would visit relatives in Southwest Georgia. And so that people there would say, he's touched in the head. And for the longest, I was like, first of all, what is touched? And then
Yes.
I finally figured out that's touched. But
Right.
those are the terms people would use to refer to someone who's got problems. And that could span from depression to just over psychosis, where someone's completely not knowing what's real and what's not real. And to kind of lump everybody together saying they're all touched. It's no wonder no one would want to come forward if they're suffering silently. They're not going to
Yeah.
want to talk about that with anybody and be ostracized.
Right. Yeah, touched in the head. Definitely, I've heard that. My wife's from Alabama, and they would say the same. I
Uh-huh.
mean, word for word, same thing. The first encounter that I had with someone that was seeking consistent help was a young man that I think we both know. who he dealt with bipolar issues. I think, I don't know my terms right. I think at the time they were calling it manic depression. This was like 25 years ago or more.
Mhm.
And when he was taking his medicine and medication properly, was very sharp, young businessman, just doing awesome things. But when he would not take it, he would have these extreme behaviors where he would even end up jailed or in some institution or something because he would just go to such an extreme opposite. And that was the first time I knew somebody, or that I knew someone who was having to deal with some mental health things and getting treatments when he would take it. And that
You
was
know,
30
I
years ago.
yeah, I think you and I both know that same person. And things I would hear was, don't be around this person because you might get it. And you can't, it's not infectious.
Okay. Yes, I did. That was the language that I would hear. So if I told someone that I had been around this guy or whatever, that's, oh, you sure you want to do that? I mean, yeah, because it was like
Mhm.
bad voodoo or juju or something is the way it
Yeah,
was. Yeah,
right.
it was talk. And one other example I had quickly is I worked as an administrator, and I worked in our well, ESE department, but that's very general. But more specifically, our students that have developmental issues. Um, and it brought me, and I had a great experience. I feel like everybody needs to spend some time with those kids because you get a perspective on life that you wouldn't have when you're not around them. And a lot of stereotypes and stuff fade away in the first couple of moments. But I remember in college, a local church would sometimes pick up students and feed us, and you'll do anything for some food in college. And it would stop by an adult center for adults with like mental disabilities and stuff. And I had those old notions like it was contagious. So I'm sitting on the bus right next to some of these clients. Years later, I look back and say, what was I afraid of? But I still had that mentality then. I was uncomfortable on the bus and all that stuff. So when I worked in the school, I reflected on those days and say, oh my gosh, these are the same people that I was scared of back then. So just some examples of how far hopefully we have come or coming in some of these discussions.
Yeah, yeah, we've come a long way for sure.
Well, can you tell us a little bit about your practice, about the things you're currently doing? You mentioned several things. You mentioned the practice, you mentioned the book, you mentioned your social media presence. What can you tell us about those things?
Sure. So I'm an adult psychiatrist, adult forensic psychiatrist. So that means I also do legal work. Um, Forensic psychiatry is the combination of uh, little legal aspects of psychiatry.
Okay.
And so as far as like from here to there,
Yeah.
I or from there to here. Anyway,
Yeah.
from where I came from, I went to medical school, then I did my residency training, which was 4 years of residency in psychiatry, and I did that in New York City. And then I did one more year of forensic training. Then I moved to Atlanta, and because I wanted to be closer to my family in Florida, and I then started working in private practice.
Okay.
I kind of pretty much chugged along with private practice work for years until I've probably reached a point around 2015, 2016 or so, where I wanted to pivot a little bit and do more than just see patients every day. And I hate to say just, I hesitate because it's not like, well,
Yeah.
that's, I enjoy it, but I still wanted to do more because the one-to-one in my office every day, I felt like I'm reaching or I'm helping the people in front of me, but I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to help more than the people in front of me. So since then, I had a podcast in 2015. That only lasted a couple of years. Not sure why I didn't stick with that.
Hmm.
Actually, I do know why I didn't stick with it. The podcast was called Beyond Burnout, and it was for working moms and how to prevent burnout as a working mom. And I chose that topic and that niche because I didn't think people wanted to hear about bipolar disorder and what I call hardcore psychiatry. So I was
Okay.
still soft touching it by talking about more lifestyle stuff, but that still really wasn't where I wanted to be and what I wanted to talk about. So that I faded from that podcast and then finally started a YouTube channel in 2018, or started going consistently on YouTube, I'd say. So that actually has given me a lot more opportunity to not only help other people outside of my practice, but also just things like television appearances and things like that. I mean, it's helped me find other ways to take my expertise and my training
Mhm.
and help other people aside from working in a private practice. But with my private practice, yeah, I see adults. I also can work on some legal cases. So someone, let's say a criminal case, the common thing is insanity. Was this person insane at the time that they committed this offense?
Okay.
Civil cases could be something happens, maybe someone gets fired and they claim that that action caused them to have all of this mental distress. So then they need an expert to evaluate the level of distress or damage that this action caused or didn't
Okay.
cause. So so I guess I kind of set it up before I even started doing the social media outreach. I set it up to have some variety in what I was doing anyway, because part of my practice was seeing people every day, appointment
Right.
after appointment. And then part of the day was testifying in court or working on legal cases. So that gave me enough mixing it up to keep
Yeah.
me interested. And then now what I'm currently doing keeps it even more interesting for me.
Right. Would you say you're a tech savvy person with all of the media that you're having to do? Would you say that? Would you give yourself that hyphen?
I would, because so keep in mind, in college, I was an electrical engineering major. Not that that necessarily makes someone tech savvy, but I've always been more technology, science based anyway, or oriented. But yeah, I started out editing my own videos. So I learned Adobe After Effects, and I even learned Flash. I mean, I learned all of these um, high tech programs to be able to do that, and I enjoyed it. It was almost like someone who likes to paint. So here I would craft or create what the script of what I was going to talk about, deliver it on camera, and then the part I really enjoyed was the editing. And so, but now I have someone editing for me so that I could keep doing more work. But yeah, I would say I'm tech savvy because I had to kind of learn how to do some of these things. And even the website, when I first had a website in 2007, before it was popular for doctors to have websites.
Mm-hmm.
And and I had someone set it up for me at first, but then I took over and learned how to use WordPress and do my own editing to my website. So that answers yes.
Okay. I'm in that same space now. Editing what I'm doing here, and I thoroughly enjoy it very, very much, and it does feel like painting or crafting or something. So I get it. Um,
Yeah, using those creative juices.
100%. I get it. Um, you mentioned something. I knew this, but for our audience, uh, I need a bridge here in our conversation because you mentioned we know that you are a psychiatrist now, do these mental health things, but you said your actual degree initially is in electrical engineering. So can you tell us about that journey? How you decided to do the electrical engineering major, and then how you ended up going into the world you're in now? What was that story like?
Yeah, well, so I've never been strong with reading and writing, um, which is interesting that I've ended up where I am today. But
Definitely.
so I was always better with math and science. I did have role models who were engineers that I was able to look at and say, okay, I think I want to do what they do. Because General Electric was where we grew up. I don't know if it's still there, but so I knew my parents knew people who worked there, and so they were kind of role models for me. I did have an interest a little bit in becoming a doctor early on, but just silly immaturity. I said, I don't want to wear a white coat every day. That's boring. So that became a no.
Was it? Really, it was the coat. Okay.
It was the white coat. So never mind.
Well, okay.
So I decided to do engineering. And then I probably got to my junior year in college and thought I really should have reconsidered becoming a doctor, but it was too late at that point. I was, a junior, one more year before graduating. There was no way I could change my major. So I just kind of kept pushing through. I think another thing that sparked my interest or made me decide to reconsider was I worked at a nursing home when I was in middle school. And I just did basic stuff, giving juice to the residents and stuff. But I enjoyed working with those people and interfacing with them. And so that made me like the idea of helping people. So I graduated college, and then I decided to do post-baccalaureate work to get my pre-med requirements to then pursue medical school. I also did work for 1 year for what is now Accenture. It wasn't Accenture back then, it was Anderson Consulting. Mm-hmm. And it was a good experience, but I still was like, I still want to do medical school. So that's when I did the pivot.
Okay. Was it did you come to that decision pretty simply? Was it like an agonizing choice, or did you get to a point that it was a pretty easy choice once you made it?
It may have been a little agonizing. I think what may have made it an easier decision to make. I certainly couldn't make that decision while I was still in school. My parents were paying tuition, and here I need to say, well, I need another year so I can get pre-med stuff. So that shut that down. But there's this thing with people. I touched on it a little bit in a video I have on my channel about existential anxiety. But people can get to these points in life where they start re-evaluating their life. And one of those things that can prompt someone to think that way is graduating something big. So whether it be graduating high school or graduating college. So here I had graduated college. I was in this job, and it was kind of like, is this it? Mm. And I started kind of rethinking, well, what should I have done? And so I think being at that stage of life I had just graduated, I did have it was a very good job, but I wasn't really satisfied with what I was doing. And that made me revisit my previous passions and take them more seriously and decide to do something about it.
Well, in your practice or just in life, do you see that often? That is, people that are doing okay, like their job and their outward things are fine, but yet they're dissatisfied because there is something else they really more deeply wanted to do, but because of the stability or whatever, they're doing this other good thing. Do you encounter that, or do you feel like that's a fairly common experience?
I think my own opinion is it's a very common experience that people get stuck just doing something that they're not that happy doing, but they've got bills to pay. They've got responsibilities. And the deeper you get into the responsibilities, the more you've got to just deliver. And so, and I've seen people who, couple of small kids, and they're like, but I'm not happy. And the spouse is like, but you are grown, and I'm not going to bust my butt so you can stop working and go to school. It's like, sorry, that boat has sailed. So, and that's a really hard place to be in, to try and to just, just kind of churn through day after day. Sometimes it works out to start your side gig on the thing that you really are more interested in. I usually talk with people about, even if it's not so much trying to change a career, like you're working as a computer tech person and your job is great, but you really want to be a lawyer or worse, a doctor, because that means you've got a long road to hoe before you get to your endpoint. Instead of trying to actually change what you do vocationally, develop some personal passion or thing that you're really into and integrate that into your personal life. And so you go to work, you do what you need to do to get your check, and then you leave work and leave work at work. And that now is when you do the stuff that really gives you joy.
When I was at a educational leadership class to be the administrator, and they were talking about that, they said something I didn't quite agree with. It was encouraging principals to give teachers more say into their lessons or how the school works, or et cetera. And it was talking about the satisfaction that people get from having a hand in their own destinies and stuff. And I'm sure that there's value to that. But I know a lot of people, teachers and otherwise, their job is their job, and that's okay. But the thing they really like is what they do afterward. Like I had a friend who runs like a whole record label and all that, because music is his thing, but he does his 9 to 5. So I understand what you're saying, that you can get some of that outside if you can't get it as your main career thing. So
that's right.
see that. Now you talked about, well, I mentioned briefly that you have a book that's coming out very soon. Would you mind sharing a little bit with us about the genesis of the book and what it's about and things about it? Because there's things regarding the topic I wanted to touch on here in a minute.
Sure. Yeah. So this book, it's called Why Am I So Anxious?
Boom.
Is huge for me. Now, granted, this is the third thing I've written. I did a self-published book called Master Your Sleep in 2011. And then I published a bipolar disorder guide. It's not really a book, but a guide, which is really a compilation of my bipolar disorder YouTube videos. So I just kind of rewrote them and put them in written form for people. And that came out in 2021. But this is different because with this, it's a traditional major publisher, Penguin Random House, who approached me. Why? Because of my presence online. So this is where my presence online got me into an opportunity that I probably wouldn't have had otherwise, or would have been a hard road to get there. I would have gotten a literary agent and have that person pitch to the publishers and that whole process. And then you got to get the literary agent to even accept what you're doing to begin with. So, and so that's one reason it's a big deal to me, is that, whoa, this is, a major publisher approaching me about writing a book. The other part that makes this a big deal is, I mentioned to you before, I never liked reading and writing. So
I didn't even think of that. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and it's because I have my own attention issues. I still have some remnants of ADHD that I had as a child. And so I read very slowly. And so it's a chore for me to have to like read some major thing. And then writing, I was always like, I wanted to do engineering part also, because you didn't have to write that many papers. So when someone says, a 10-page paper on this topic, I'm like, I can say that in 2 paragraphs. What else am I going to talk about? So so psychiatry actually helped turn me into more of a thinker, or I was always a thinker, but a reader and writer. So for me to be able to like from scratch write a book is a big deal.
I didn't even think about that part. That is a very big deal. You mentioned the ADHD. Was that diagnosed when we were like when you were elementary school or high school? Or I don't remember the discussion of the term back then.
Yeah. So, all I know, and I'm just going based on what my mom told me, is I think I was more hyperactive. So I was prescribed phenobarbital, which is a barbiturate that you'd never use for anything like that this day and
Right.
age, but I was prescribed that to slow me down. And I have seen some home videos where I'm just like all over the place, a little toddler.
Wow.
I'm thinking, thank God I'm not, my child wasn't like that I'm not
Yeah.
the parent of that. But yeah, I was all over the place. So I was slowed down with medicine. I think though, so some of the kind of leftover remnants. So I never walked around. Leftover remnants was this issue of I read slowly. It's hard for me to like focus in on reading long things. So that's why I'm better at listening to books. But I didn't walk around in elementary school and high school saying I've got ADHD because we didn't even really talk about it in my house because I wasn't on medication. I was just a
Oh,
slow reader.
got it. Wow. No, I mean, I've known you for all this time, and I'm trying to remember, like, if I or others, regarded you as like a hyper person or something like that's what kids would say, now. But I don't recall that.
You would never guess. I know. If anything, people have to infuse energy in me. Um,
Yeah.
so that's what I say. I mean, I'm going by based on what my mom told me and reverse engineering based on how with a medication I was treated with. Maybe
Okay.
they're wrong, but I do appreciate that I've got a mild form of some attention issues, but it's not that bad.
Okay. That's, and so the fact that you're writing a book, that totally escaped me. How that is so opposite what somebody would have expected because of the reading issues and stuff. That's a big deal, or like you say, for multiple reasons. When does the book come out
It
or
comes
become
out
available?
in August, that's just next month. I've been saying in August forever, but yeah, August 16th is the
Okay,
publication date.
I got it.
Mhm.
I'm looking forward to that. Uh, let's go back in time for a moment. So, but because the show is from there to here, we already said that you didn't, when you were a little kid, you didn't expect that you would be doing all of the things that you're doing now. If you had to describe to somebody what you were like, say, middle school age, what was Tracey Irvin like? What would you say? It's
I
hard for
guess I
someone to
would
do it by themselves.
I would say that I was very studious and very curious. So I was always very a curious child. So even before middle school, my father would call it, I used to tear things up. My mother called it, I was curious as to how things worked. So I would take things apart to see how they worked. But so the way that looked as a middle schooler was me, asking lots of questions.
Okay.
So, if someone says da da da, I would say, well, why? I was one of those. Why kids? Probably to the extent that maybe I got on people's nerves. I don't know. But yeah, I as far as socially, I had friends. I wasn't the most outgoing person in the world because I'm introverted. So I do need like time to myself and things like that. But I did have friends.
Okay. Yeah, and that's the kind of thing I was getting at. Like, if you was, that was going to be my next question. Would you have described yourself as an introvert or an extrovert or something in the middle? And the reason why I bring it up is I think people have in their mind that maybe certain careers are only for certain personality types, which may not always be the case. So that's why I was going to ask you: were you outgoing, in the middle, quiet, loud, quiet, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I think that I would say I think psychiatry does require a certain amount of empathy that you have. So you have to care, not that that nobody else cares, but there's some people I just think aren't built to want to listen to all these problems and be able to know what to do with it and filter it and move on. So there's a certain amount of ability to be able to listen, be curious about what someone's telling you, and process it, and try and put them yourself in their shoes to the degree that you can um, help them feel comfortable about how they feel and that you understand them. Um, as far as I lost my train of thought on something else I was going to say though. As far as the extrovert introvert, I do think there's a misunderstanding that many people will have about that introvert means you're not social and extrovert means you're very social.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Introvertedness or introversion is more about where you get your energy and what energizes you, what depletes you. So the introvert can be very social. I can go to a party and socialize with people, but it will drain me. Like my battery goes from full or 3/4 full to almost empty. And what I have to do when I go home is I have to have peace and quiet. Like it's not like my library, my house has to be a library, but I can't then come home and then start another conversation. Or I know one of the things that can be hard for me is at the end of my day, where with my job, I'm listening to people all day, is then like have phone calls to return. Like if someone calls me, oh, give me a call, I want to talk about this. Like I really don't like talking on the phone. And I thought, why don't I like talking on the phone? I used to. Well, it's because I've spent all day talking and I can't talk anymore at the end of the day. I just need to like be in my head and recharge. Whereas the extrovert person they can be completely depleted by solitude. Like
Wow.
that could kill them.
Oh, okay.
They draw energy from people. So it's not so all or none, black and white, like you like people and I don't. It's just
Yeah.
the experience they have from being around people, the two different types is different internally. It's what it does to them, but both of them can socialize.
I appreciate that explanation. I was at an event a while ago and it was great. And I could feel the moment. I was there like 3 hours. I could feel the moment at about like 2 minutes and 17 seconds where I ran out of people juice. I, I actually felt like I hit this wall. It doesn't
Uh-huh.
often happen, but it did. I felt that. And then when my wife and I were first married, those first few years, at least when our children were very young, I was a teacher and she was stayed at home for a year or so or whatever. And yes, I would use all my words up at school. And then I got home and she had only been saying gaga goo goo with our little baby and no one to talk to. She hadn't used any of her words. And so we had to figure out a way because I'm coming home out of words and she got all hers to use. We kind of worked out sort of a little truce time, like for the first 15 minutes or so when I was home, we didn't talk too much or whatever, then give me a chance to kind of bounce back. It worked to varying degrees, but I can see what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I have to catch myself because similar to your situation, I mean, my husband is a talker. And I'm like, if I never leave anything for him, then, aren't we supposed to be partners in life together? So
Right.
I'm going to give all myself to, work and people outside the house and come home and have nothing for him. And he's got nobody to talk to.
Okay.
So, that's not fair. So yeah, it's a balancing act.
Yeah, we had to do the same thing. I think we got a pretty good handle on it now, but still. But like I said, I was at that event a few weeks ago, and I ran out of gas. So
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah,
yeah.
I know it. I know the feeling.
Wow. Okay, that helps me. Hope I hope that helps some of our viewers understand themselves a little bit better. Um, okay, well, I guess we're near the end of our time. Is there anything else about what you do or about projects you have coming up that you want to share with us?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
I got my hand in a lot of things right now, but no, I don't have anything coming up.
I do. Oh, well, then that leads me to maybe one last question. Um, I had a discussion, our very first guest, Mr. George Whitehead, we were talking about achievement, people reaching goals and things. And he had the thought that those people that are really excellent in certain things, the athlete or the whoever, they have to have such a devotion to what they do to be excellent that it takes a lot of their time, a lot of their effort. And people speak so highly of having balance in their life. The part of what he was saying is that some people, to achieve these high heights, they have to give maybe what's an unbalanced amount of attention to what they do. So my question is, what are your thoughts about the benefit of balance and how that relates to someone who wants to be very good at something and the trade-off that comes with that, if my question makes sense?
Well, I guess my thoughts about that would be, in addition to we all need balance, and I think we've all heard that, so that's nothing new. What I would add to that is, I think that you have to be careful to still leave some margin for yourself, even in the things that are a good cause or the things that you enjoy, because you can overdo it in anything, even if it's a good thing. Um, and what do you fill in that margin is your self-care. And what does that look like? That's not necessarily getting manicures. That's
Okay.
making sure you're taking care of yourself with getting proper rest, having some time to yourself, especially if you're the introvert person who needs some time in their own head. Leaving time in your schedule for exercising, and that even if it's not like you have to have a gym membership, but whatever kind of activity, walking in your neighborhood or something, so that you're not just getting up and doing all day long and then going to bed and then getting up and doing again. And
Okay.
still the person who's doing something that they enjoy, like, oh, well, but this, I'm so passionate about this and da, da, da. But if you're doing it from sun up to sundown with hardly any breaks or time for yourself or time for other people in your life, because that's also an important aspect of care, is your interaction with other people and relationships and having healthy relationships. If you eliminate those things because you're just so busy with this stuff, you can still crash and burn.
Okay. That's good. I like that. That helps me personally, actually, because I think people think that since they're doing the thing they like, that's good. That's the self-care box, but they don't realize that's not necessarily the same thing.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Got it. Well, Dr. Marks, thank you very much for your time today. I'm extremely excited that you're here, not just because we go so far back, but the variety of things that you're doing. And I wanted to expose my audience to that.
Thank you.
And
I enjoyed this. I enjoyed the talk.
All right. Well, have a great day.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.